Welcome back to Watch It. In this Watch It, we are going to be talking about variables and identifiers. And a variable holds a value, and values are very important in programming because those are what the program manipulates. Whatever the value is in that variable can be used to solve a problem. Now, these objects are classified into different classes or data types, and the two that we're going to look at first are integer and string. An integer is a whole number, and a string is anything that contains like words or multiple types of things. It can have letters, it can have numbers, it can have dashes. So you can identify strings by the fact that they are within double quotes or single quotes, and that is what a string is, okay? So variables allow us to manipulate stored data, and it is always a good idea that when you are trying to identify a variable that you use a name or an identifier that is descriptive. So it is important that it says to use a label that is descriptive to you, the programmer, and anyone else that may be looking at your program later. Simple names are best, but don't make it too simple with just letters unless you comment the code so that you know what the letters represent. Okay, so we're going to scroll down here right a little bit further. And so it says, once you create a variable with a name, the stored value can then be retrieved at a later time in the program. So print parentheses A. So if I said A equals 8, okay, in my program, later on I could say print A, and it would print out 8. So we are going to look at how that works here in just a second. So, but one thing you do need to know is when you're creating your identifier that it is bound by spelling and it is bound by capitalization. Okay, so those things matter. So student with a capital S is not the same as student with a lowercase s. So it's very important that you remember that capitalization and spelling matter. Okay, so we're going to come down here and let's look at some examples of a good name. So we have grade equal 86, student equal Bob. Notice that Bob is within quotation, and the end equals false. And the end equals false, that is called a Boolean, and we'll talk more about those later, but those are true false values. Okay. Now this name right here, this is a bad, it's supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. It's super long, has no real meaning, and so it's not something that we would want to use as a variable name. That one guy, not really a good variable name. I mean, it works. It's not that it wouldn't work, it's just that it's not very descriptive. And then ABCD equal false. Well, what is ABCD? Okay, so those things are not a good idea to have. So we're going to scroll down here and we're going to look at our activity. So it says that if there is any information in our online editor, click the menu option, which is the 3 lines, and then click reset, click yes, I'm sure. So if you're using the online editor and you open a page and there happens to be something in it, it is always a good idea to come up here, hit reset, are you sure, say yes, and it'll reset it to a clean online editor for you to work in. Sometimes what happens is multiple people will be working at the same time and their work will pop in there, and so you just need to clean it out for you, and then it'll save your work while you're looking at it, and then vice versa for the other person. All right, so we're going to come down here to our activity. I personally am going to use our Python IDL. So I'm going to open the Python IDL, and I am going to just move it over to the side. So the first thing it says to do is type grade and click run. So I'm just going to type grade and hit enter, and I get an error that tells me that name grade is not defined, meaning that I can't just type grade without actually putting a value into it or defining it somewhere. So now we're going to say grade equal 86, and hit enter. Okay, now you're going to say the end equal false, hit enter. Student lowercase, okay, equal, and we're going to put Bob in quotation marks, hit enter. Now type in print and type grade. We're going to put grade in between the print and hit enter. And so that gives us 86. So what it's done is we put the value into grade. So grade is like a box, okay? It's like a container. I'm just trying to find, oh, let's see if I can put this. So it's like this little container. And we are taking our grade, my paper clip, and I am going to take my value of 86 and I am going to place it into my container. And then when I need it again, which I'm using for the print, then I say print grade and it comes over and it takes out that 86 and it prints it to the screen so that I have it. I think that's a good analogy of how the variable works, is that it is just a holder, a placeholder for the value that you want. So if I come in here and I say print grade, it prints 86. If I say print the end, okay, it's going to tell me false because that's the value that I placed in there. And if I say print student, then it's going to tell me Bob. Now, one of the things in the activity, it says change the print for student to student with a capital S. So if I come in here and I say print and I type student with a capital S and I hit enter, it's going to tell me that there's an error, name student is not defined, meaning that the name student with a capital S is not defined. But if I go back and I change it to student with a lowercase s and hit enter, it is going to print it. So now you're going to click back over here and you're going to answer the question of what type of error did this cause. If you don't know the type of error, go back and look in chapter 2 where we talked about the different errors, and look up and see which error this could have been. Was it a logic, a syntax, or a runtime error? Remember that logic errors have to do with something in your code. Did it not logically work? Okay, did it not, you know, like 0 times 6? What did that give you? You know, was that what you really wanted? A syntax errors mean that you typed it incorrectly, like you didn't type print correctly, you put a capital P instead of a lowercase p. Or was it a runtime error, that there was nothing wrong with the way that you wrote it, but when you ran it, you got an error because it couldn't understand what was happening. So go back and look at the errors and then answer the question. If you have any questions for me, please email me. How long was that one? 8 minutes? Okay, so